Hi, thanks very much for stopping by. I'm going to try and make this presentation as valuable as I can to you. The purpose of this presentation is really to show you the value of social media as a lead generating system in 2020 and 2021 and beyond. So I think the premise here is that the competitive landscape is more difficult than ever before. I also would contend that cybersecurity is a particularly difficult sell, and of all probably managed services of cybersecurity is an extremely difficult sell. And the world of social media is also extremely difficult. There's a lot of noise and chatter. So the challenge to make social media a viable lead generating system for a cybersecurity company marketing to small, medium-sized businesses, I think is some challenge, and I want to address how we would go about doing that in a cost-effective way. So, it was my view that social media was a waste of time a few years back. I really had no time for it. I to some extent, I still can't understand why people spend the time on it. They do, but the fact of the matter is they do. I used to think, even if they did, they're just messing around. It's really not a great place for leads, and it's also time consuming. And I myself was the least advocate, I think, probably for social media as a business activity, and you can imagine. However, I have changed my mind. And the reason why I've changed my mind is because facts are facts. Over 70% of the US population now hold a social media account, and apparently the average daily usage is 30 minutes to 2 hours. And it's probably rising. I mean, that was done before the whole COVID-19 outbreak. And Facebook is the most popular social network, so we can't ignore that. And the platform recorded over 190 million accounts. And that means our target audience is almost certainly participating somewhere in this arena. And in over 70% of businesses use social media to generate leads. So businesses are doing it, your competitors are doing it to a lesser or greater degree. You may be doing it to a lesser or greater degree. But I don't think anybody of us can ignore social media. So the question is now, how do we make it work? Well, let's not underestimate just how hard it is. Here's a list of complaints that you see from social media managers quite regularly. Complaining, working with a limited budget, keeping content ideation fresh month after month, finding the ideal posting timings, the budget, getting the green light from C-suite, the constant change in social media trends, ad blindness, where the users are bombarded with things and they don't see it after a while, follow fatigue, getting lost at sea, in other words, so much chatter, trying to give every social network equal attention. That's not so easy at all. Keeping content fresh and so forth. I could go on, but you get the idea. Now, what we are really trying to do at the end of the day here is I would say, and I quote here, what you are basically doing in social media is going down to the river and fishing every day. Every day you try to find the best time and place to cast a line and hook fish with the most attractive bait you can find, which of course is really nothing more than a sort of standard sales and funnel concept. And so it requires going down every day. So that's something that is best, I think, outsourced to somewhere else, because in my experience, the pressures of work and the distractions of work mean that social media is often pushed aside in favor of apparently more immediate concerns, which is completely understandable. But the fact of the matter is, for you to be successful in social media, you've got to be down there every day casting your line. So I would say that the goal of social media is to push leads into the standard sales funnel, and that's best performed outside the company, which I think can be more cost-effective way of doing it than inside a company. It's, I think, one of those buy rather than make it your own deals. So we're faced with this issue that social media is extremely difficult, but it also has to work. no one is going to pretend that social media isn't here to stay. We know now that the brand is what customers say it is. There's a lot of uncontrollable chatter in social media, and that we need to influence that conversation. The nature of sales has changed. There was a time when you needed something, you'd walk into a store and the salesperson would know a tremendous amount and you would be beholden to them. Nowadays, customers are much more in charge. There are some products where they're almost completely in charge and they do all their research, and really the salesman is nothing more than an order taker. In cybersecurity, that's not true, because it's complicated and still has a huge sales role to play by experienced salespeople, no question. However, at the same time, the customer, the prospect, still expects to do a little bit of research and have information available out there if they want it. And again, there's a role that social media can play in that. And then I think the other thing that's obviously changed is the technology. There was a time when the technology we now have for small, medium enterprises was only available for large companies, but now that's not true. We have an incredible opportunity to automate the engagement with our prospects long before they reach the sales team, and it is important that we do so. So now I've laid out some principles of success, because having shown how difficult it is, well, we have to make it work. Well, the most important principle probably is right there at the top, which is that messaging should follow a viral code. And what I mean by that is there are some principles that use a fundamental human psychology to get engagement, and there's that messages should have a social currency. They use triggers, they use emotion, they use public aspects, sort of social awareness. In other words, what other people think of you and how that's reported. Practical value, things that have practical value tend to get shared, and all this needs to be wrapped up in stories. And the real purpose of the story is not only that it engages emotively and has interesting aspects to it, it's that a good story also has an essential message buried in there, which is much more effective when it's buried in the story than if it's just stated in a cold fact. So that's what I mean by messaging following a viral code. And when it's used that way, it's much more powerful. Second thing that's very important with social media is A/B testing. And that's simply because things are changing and we don't know what works and doesn't work in a specific sense. We understand the broad framework by which we communicate, but what specifically works for your company, for your target audience, is something that needs to be tested constantly and also improved on. I mean, there's always, whatever lift we're getting at any stage in the funnel, there's always an opportunity to know more about the customer and improve it. Then the next part is developing leads through smart remarketing strategies. Again, this is simply leveraging the technology now that exists. The platforms, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, are always upgrading what you can do, and you can plug these into your CRM through, if it's not directly, through integrators. So there's an awful lot of technology that we can leverage, which makes managing social media cost effective, and we need to do that. I would argue the goal of social media is actually to create owned, engaged traffic, because I don't expect in a business like cybersecurity that conversion is going to take place without a salesperson becoming engaged at some point, unless it's a very simple, trivial, automated solution. But if it's anything closer towards managed services, then that's not going to happen. So the purpose of social media, I think, is to get it to the stage of the funnel where the salesman takes over, and that lead has been properly nurtured to make the sales job as easy as possible. Another important thing that is a principle of success is that our brand is now out there in social media, and it's something that we can't ignore. So if conversations taking place, we need to be out there. And again, I would say this is best served by an agency rather than the company, because the company, people inside a company are just extremely busy, and a dedicated resource is to me is a much better idea. In other words, a dedicated social media resource for that company, but one that exists outside the boundaries of the entity, I think is probably the most cost-effective way of protecting a brand. The other thing is, because of that, because technology is always changing, it's a specialist role. It's hard even for a specialist to keep up with the speed and change of social media. So to be cost effective and to be efficient, to use and adapt to the technology and adapt to the rules as it changes, I think requires a specialist. And again, it's not an expertise that you're likely to want to afford inside the walls of the entity. It's something that one should effectively rent. I think another important part of success here is a very clear value proposition that's used to communicate to the market. And very often what I see in cybersecurity companies is the value proposition is expressed in technical terms or expressed in incomplete terms. And one of the things I would offer is a restatement of the value proposition. So it's what I would call campaign ready, and I think that makes a big difference. And then finally, because you're outsourcing, you're not taking on the same burden of cost that you normally would do. I build the team for the problem, and that's all done on a piecemeal basis. So in other words, people are paid for output, and so it couldn't possibly be a lower cost. And I think if you put those all those items together, I think what you have is a framework for success there. And one of the goals, as mentioned before, is to create own traffic. And that's the main point of that is that the platforms change. They even kick people off. The algorithm changes. You don't control the traffic on any of these social media. So the primary objective when one comes into with a contact that you've engaged with is to essentially acquire permission to communicate to that prospect outside the realms of that particular social media. In a simple terms, it would be to get their email address, get the permission to market to them, and then we have it doesn't cost us essentially to engage them going forward, and we control it. So I want to talk about what happens at the early stage of that funnel before it gets to the salesperson. Now, a report, I can't remember who said that report, but I could find it. It's 51% of small businesses think it's unlikely or very unlikely that they'd be targeted for a cyber attack, which is definitely my experience. People just do not think it's going to happen to them. I would even put that figure higher myself, that 71% of those who have never experienced a breach thought that the potential damage to their reputation was an important consideration. Yes, and I'd go further than that. They completely underestimate the cost of a breach. So there's so regardless of whether that belief is false or not. Obviously, I think we'd all think that belief was false. The fact that the belief exists and it persists. So in my mind, it reminds me of selling life insurance, and I think we might make progress in cybersecurity. Instead of talking about the threat and talking about the technology that we have that meets the threat and how easy it is to manage, we might do better essentially selling cybersecurity using the same principles that people sell life insurance, which is that, as I say, insurance products are sold not on the probability of an event occurring, but the catastrophic effect that outcome would have on something the prospect cares about other than themselves. So the classic example of that would be selling life insurance by saying what happens to your loved ones when the breadwinner is no longer able to provide for them. And that is essentially how they sell all life insurance. And I would imagine that's going to be a much more effective way of selling cyber insurance, cybersecurity as a sort of insurance product in effect, and using the same method. It should be tested if that hasn't been tried before. So I would use automated messaging to create compelling and evocative communication about the potentially catastrophic post-attack business environment for the prospect. And that's what those campaigns would do, is we take them off the top of social media and put them into the beginnings of the funnel that we own, that is the sort of messaging that would take place. And so the goal an ultimate call to action of the automated lead nurturing campaigns is to arrange for a conference between the prospect and the sales team, because unquestionably in a relatively complex sales environment, no one is going to sell and manage services without talking to someone. So, and I think this approach addresses the core resistance in the market that this won't happen to them by adapting the successful line taken by the insurance industry. That's my belief. Of course, my proposal doesn't rest on that, but I do think that's a good idea, and I do think the conversions would be, and I would really like to see some more A/B testing on that to see how successful we could be with this approach. Now, as I say, so our mission is to have the sales team busy selling. So our role at ProspectSurge is to supplement your existing lead generation system with enough qualified leads that you cannot fail to hit your financial goals as laid out in the current business plan. So my approach to social media is say, this is not fluffy. This is not something that is a nice to have. This in 2020 and beyond is an essential lead generating system. And on top of that, I would add that the social media lead generating system should manage in an automatic fashion the transition of cold lead to warm lead and hand off to the sales team. And we should be able to do that in sufficient numbers to keep you busy. Now, I say the way we make this affordable is we build teams that match the solution. So we have an entirely virtual sales structure. We have no full-time staff. It's entirely cloud computing. Everything is done through Zoom and so forth. We have minimum infrastructure. It's output-based compensation, so no one's on a contract other than a specific project, and sales teams are just created, that's SELLS, sales teams are created just to solve particular problems for particular companies. And we have well-defined deliverables, so we know when that project is particularly over. And that's how you keep it the lowest possible cost. And the reason why that's important is because it takes time for social media to work, and the last thing you need is a sort of high upfront cost that makes the whole thing horribly unattractive. So that's the reason for that. And then the deliverables that are, I think, are an essential component of these successful social media lead generation system is, first of all, we should manage all the social media. So you just take it out of your hands. We should produce and publish social media content. That doesn't mean necessarily we produce all of it. I'm sure there are papers that need to be written and material that needs to be written inside, and that can continue. But you should also rely on us to be able to create from either what you have or be able to write original material to engage the audience. And that leads us on to copywriting, because the copywriting is going to be relevant there, but it's also relevant in the campaigns that we would be running for the lead nurturing, and also the landing page optimization. So one of the elements of the landing page optimization will of course be rewriting the copy. And again, what I've seen from cybersecurity small business solutions landing pages and websites is a clear need to rewrite the copy. Now, somebody who would do all that would normally cost between $60,000 and $80,000 a year, perhaps. And I'm suggesting that we can at least create the equivalent of that, if not produce a greater performance, for less than $1,000 a month. It's almost like hiring a digital marketing expert for $12,000 a year with no health benefits or vacation pay. Well, there it is. I hope that piqued your interest. There are my contact details. I invite you to get in touch and we can discuss this in more depth and see if we can't find a solution for you where we can use the social media and leverage it so that we can fill your funnel with a good number of high quality leads. I look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you for your time.